My name is Cynthia Henry, and I'm the liaison to the College of Human Sciences. And Jingjing Wu is my colleague that is helping me run the workshop. Together, we'll run this workshop today. And we're going to just quickly run through Tableau. And here's a little bit of what we're going to do today, our outline of what we think is going to happen. We're going to have our overview, and we're going to talk about our Tableau terminology, and I was looking for it. And we're going to talk about our Tableau terminology, and then we're going to work through our data visualization projects. So we're going to do several different visualizations. So I think that will give you some experience so that you can apply it to your own data. And then we'll actually do some exercises, hopefully on your own a little bit, but we're quite a small set, so maybe we'll just still work through that together. I'm pretty interactive, and I want you to be able to answer questions. I might ask questions, and I know the smaller the people that we have, the less people will want to respond to that. But please know that if we are talking about anything and you don't really understand it, feel free to unmute yourself and ask or type in the chat. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure we explain everything step by step. So Tableau really has quite a bit of platforms. So we have Tableau Public and Tableau Desktop. And so let's talk about Tableau Public first. This is the one in the email that I asked you to kind of sign up for, and that's where we'll be building most of our stuff today. I will only open my Tableau Desktop if for some reason Tableau Public is not working. It usually is always working, but I just try to have it as a backup is all I meant. And so we'll get into that in just a second. But just let's talk about some of the data limits. So it only supports data sets of up to 15 million rows. Now I know 15 million rows, that's like a lot of data, but I really think in the next couple of years, people will be using that amount of data and trying to move it around and store it. So I don't think it will be unrealistic to see that grow. Also, it will use Excel and Google Sheets, our CSV and MS Access. So MS Access is a database programming that you can build. And so if you had data that you were exporting from that, you could use them here as well. But some basic ones, Excel, Google Sheets, which is nice, and CSV. Then we'll be publishing our Tableau Public information. So let's really talk about what that means. You can only save work up to 10 gigabytes per account. So that's going to go pretty fast once you start doing some complex visualizations, and we'll talk about that as we move through there. And just recently, in like the last year, like in 2021, they allowed you to be able to disable the data download. And so anything that you build in Tableau Public, you have to publish in Tableau Public. So be aware of that. I would not save anything that's confidential in the Tableau Public because you just don't know what the security is on that website. And that's what the use for Tableau Desktop would be. So Tableau Desktop is another platform. It works very much like the Public. And once you learn things in Public, you could translate that to desktop pretty easily. It allows you to save files to your own computer, but it also has some additional data connection options where it has different databases or cloud services that you could save to or download data from. And students here at Texas Tech could sign up with a year license, so you have to be a enrolled student. And it's renewable, so if you were a graduate student and this was your first year, you could renew it next year if needed. And then if you're teaching, a professor or even staff, you would be able to use this. Faculty or staff could use the teaching non-commercial academic research link there. And my slides are also on our LibGuide, which Jingjing put in our chat. So you can make sure that if you wanted these two links, you could find those through the PowerPoint there. And I think she's dropping them in the chat now as well. Please note that the teaching non-commercial academic research is really used for just academic research. If you're teaching somebody else how to use Tableau, that'd be great. But let's say I was working with student retention on campus and the staff wanted to use this, that would not be academic research. That would just be research that the university needed to know to help promote the university. So please know that there are some limitations in these licenses. Okay. So let's go ahead and kind of discuss a little bit about Tableau. What can it do? What can we make in Tableau? You can see we have lots of charts here that you can make in Tableau. Tableau is a tool designed for visualizations. It can create lots of visualizations very quickly. It's unusual in the number of and the type of visualizations it offers and how easy it is to move between these. It offers all kinds of charts and graphs that you can get with a statistical graphics package, but it also does maps and it also does like tree maps. So a tree map is this, you know, these little rectangles. That's what a tree map kind of looks like. But don't worry if you don't know what that really is. A lot of times you might see those on infographics, but we'll do one in a minute, and so you can see it a little bit more. So it focuses on interactive visualizations. So you can click on things and you can select them and you can drag them, and you can really set it up the way you want to review your own data, and also the way you want it to be published for your readers. And it'll also allow your readers to interact with the data as well. So if you wanted them to be able to select certain data to narrow down or refine, you would be able to set it up that way, and they could be interactive with it as well. So let's just talk about what it's going to look like once we get into Tableau Public. So in Tableau, where you work is called a sheet. This area is the sheet. This whole thing is a workbook. So that's language very much like from Excel or spreadsheets. So the sheet is in the center here, and the whole workbook is the whole thing. And sheets are where you will be placing your data and organizing it, analyzing it to create visualizations or views. And each sheet is one view or one visualization. It can be very complex or it can be very simple. And then a workbook is all the files along here, the bottom, in one file. So this whole thing is workbook. This one sheet is where one visualization will live. And you can create new items down here, new sheets, new dashboards, and new stories. So let's see what a dashboard would look like. This is where you've created multiple sheets and you pulled that information into a dashboard. And that's where you'll present your visualizations, and you can arrange them so that it completes a more visual environment. So you can see that there is 3 visualizations on this dashboard, and we'll be able to create several of those so that you can see how to build that. Oh, and one last thing is Tableau also covers stories, but we won't really be covering stories, but it is very much like a PowerPoint, if you will, where you can build several visualizations into a series of images of views. So Tableau treats data where it thinks that Tableau considers data variables to be either dimensions up here or measures. And this is one thing that I kind of struggled with when I was learning Tableau. Measures are simple to me, right? They're numerical values, they're numbers, and then everything else is a dimension. So that can be a categorical data or text or string, sometimes depending on the programming you've done. Text data is sometimes referred to as string data. It can be a date, it can be Boolean values. So all different types of things can be a dimension, but most of the time measures are just numbers. And so understanding the data on how Tableau looks at it is important, because Tableau will try to help you or force you to use certain visualizations based on the data. So what it does is Tableau tries to predict what you need or want. And so then it's going to kind of, set up what it thinks you're trying to do. So if Tableau sees two categorical data, then variables, it will not really understand how to build a visualization that is based on an XY axis. So it really is still using XY axis. And so like if we were using a scatter plot, it doesn't know how to chart the points over the two categorical axes. It thinks of a scatter plot as numbers on X and Y axis. So it's good to know this and how it impacts what you can pick as a chart or a graph, but also how you can manipulate the data as well. For example, if you can't find your variable, look to see if it's in the wrong list, and then you might need to move them around or recode the variables, and we'll see examples about that. I just wanted you to kind of see, this is what it looks like on the side of the sheet, and we have all of our dimensions up here. You can see they're blue, and that's why dimensions is blue. And then we have all of our measures down here, and they're green. And so then we think of those as numbers. Now remember, sometimes date or time may be considered a dimension. So even though we think of it as a number, it's not a true number. So, okay. Let's look at how data is kind of used in Tableau. So here's a simple sample of data. We have an order date when the order was placed, how much was purchased, and then what product category it was. So if that's like office supplies, technology, or furniture. And so Tableau is always trying to sum up things, or trying to aggregate, if you will, the numbers that it's giving. So the next thing, if we told them Tableau, hey, do something with this column, Tableau would say, okay, I'm going to sum that up and I'm going to aggregate it into this total. And so you can see that's what has happened here. But then if we look at it and then we try to get some more detail out of that data, we want to maybe subset it by different categories. And so you can subset it by a product category. And so Tableau will still sum up the grand total, but also each category is summed here. And also you can separate it by date as well. And so you can see the totals across the bottom, and then each total for each year, or the grand total. So just be thinking about that, that Tableau will automatically try to manipulate your data to what it thinks you're going to be wanting to do. So then finally, once you have it in there, then you can kind of start selecting how you want it to be represented, what kind of chart you wanted to be using, if you want to colorize it, if you want to change the shape of it, and we'll see all of that. So you can split it by multiple items and by the date. And you can see that we've split it up by the years, even though we had a month and a day and a year in the beginning. Tableau really wants to try to see what would be useful for you overall. So would it be useful for you to see down to the date, or would it be useful for you to look at the whole year? And so it would sum up by the year. Okay. Let's go ahead and get into Tableau, unless we have any questions. I just wanted to kind of orientate you into the product before we got into there. So I'm going to get out of my PowerPoint real quick and get into Tableau. So our Tableau public link is available, and I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to move this out of the way. And I'm going to sign in. If you haven't signed up, go ahead and take a minute. It doesn't take very long. So I'm going to sign in. I'm going to use my email to sign in. and then the password that I created for it. And you can see we're sitting here in my account. And I have a few things down here. You probably have an empty area. But let's go ahead and start with Creative Is. And so it's going to open us up into a new workbook, but also allow us to put some data here. And we're going to use the data that we had downloaded from our website. I had two Excel spreadsheets listed there. One was emissions and one was Netflix. We're going to use the emissions one first. I'm going to drop that over here. You can drag and drop it over here, or you can upload it, however you want to get it in there. It's going to take it a second to get in. And so it kind of created that extraction, if you will, if you were seeing that. We'll need that to happen before we could save it. I'm going to go ahead and look at some data, and then we'll get into a sheet. So we've pulled in this emissions Excel spreadsheet over here, and then it had three sheets or spreadsheets, if you will. And so we can see the first one was state CO2, which is carbon dioxide from 1990 to 2018. Then we have a sheet called pivot, and then we have a sheet called state populations. Let's go ahead and grab this first one, and we're going to actually drag it into the center where it tells us to drag tables here. So I've moved that over here. And if you haven't really opened this spreadsheet to begin with, you could see the data all from right here. I'm just going to pull this up a little bit more so we can see it. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Update Now. But the difference between Update Now and Update Automatically, if I click on the Update Automatically, it will always automatically just move through to update. And then today I want us to kind of see when that happens. If you want to choose Update Automatically, that's fine, but I'm going to choose the Update Now so that each time it will ask me to update, and I want you to be able to see that. Once you get in here and a little bit more comfortable, I don't think you necessarily need to see the Update Now every time. You could just choose to use it automatically, but I think sometimes it's helpful for you to see what is happening when it's changing and updating. So I'm going to click on that. And so let's kind of talk about this space. We've pulled in the data here. It tells you which sheet you're looking at. It tells you the name of it. It tells you the fields types and the names and where it's located. And then it actually shows you the fields over here. So let's go ahead and talk about this. We can see that the field names are CO2 state, CO2 sector, CO2 year, and CO2 emissions. But let's look at what kind of type each of these are. So this is actually the state that we're looking at, and I'm going to click on that little globe, and it will tell us that it is a string. But because it's a globe, I also know it thinks it's a geographical role, and it's identified that it's a state or a province already. And so it's read that information correctly. And then the next one, CO2 sector. Now, CO2 sector is probably going to be pretty unique for this data set, for my data. You know, you might have a lot of data that might have a state or a year involved in the data set somewhere, but the sector or emissions are going to be pretty unique to my information today. So I'm going to see that it has told me that it is a string. That ABC means it's a string, but I can click on that and you can see that it is highlighted as a string. And then let's go ahead and look over here. So we have the year listed here, and I'm going to click on the number because now it's reading that year as a number. And it is reading it as a whole number, which is a good thing. I mean, you're not going to have just part of a number, right? For a year, we'll have a 4-digit whole number. But sometimes people think, oh, I should move this to date or date and time. But a date has to have a month, a day, and a year to be a true date. And then of course, a date and time has to have a time component. So you couldn't move this to one of those because it's only the year. So we need to leave it in the number and the whole number. And Tableau is getting smarter and smarter with the variables of years. So if you can label anything that is a year, I think I would really encourage you to do so, because I think it will help it treat it appropriately and look at your data more clearly. So then the last one is the emissions. So it's going to be a number too, but it is a decimal. So it doesn't need to be whole, and it's marked it as a decimal. So that, look how much Tableau already got correct just by pulling in the data. It knew each of the categories already here and how to read this information. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into a sheet, and I'm going to do that down here at the bottom. I'm going to click on sheet, and it's going to create this extraction, and you need that extraction to be able to save or publish. They've really kind of eliminated the save option, but only a publish option, and we'll do that now. So let's go ahead and do that. So you can see that you can do the publish as here, or you can even find it under file on the opposite side of the screen, publish as. And so I'm just going to click on that, and it's going to ask me to name it. So I'm going to go ahead and name this workbook as emissions. You can name it whatever you want to name it. Sorry, typing here. Now, some of these things that they're asking me here is, do I want to show the sheets as tabs? And that's going to be a little bit more clearer further into the process, but I usually go ahead and let that be visible. Now, I typically do not use a password for this because I'm not storing anything on Tableau Public that is confidential. Remember, we kind of talked about that already. We don't want to have anything here that we really want to be not visible to the world. And even though if there's a password there, I would think that, you know, we just don't know the security on this page. So I would want to use that on my desktop. And so then I'm going to click publish. And it's going to take it a second. And then it's ready to kind of start generating. And now as I try to publish, you know, if I make saves later, it will be a little bit quicker because it already did that extraction. Now, if I pulled in more new data, then I would have to do a new extraction. And we'll talk about that in the future. Okay. So, let's get in and try a simple bar graph. Well, let's orientate ourselves to this page a little bit. So we have our information here. Again, we have the name of our spreadsheet up here, and these are all of our dimensions and our measures. If I needed to get back to our data source that we were just playing around with before we got into the sheet, I could click here. We have our first sheet here, and you could create another new sheet down here, or you could create a new dashboard. And then the last button is for a story, which we're not really going to talk about today. But let's go ahead and see if we could do a simple bar graph. I'm going to just grab the CO2 state, and I'm going to put it in the columns. And so you can see that it has identified that it's made an individual column for each state. What if I move that down to rows? It will make a single column with each row being represented by a state. I'm actually going to just put that back into the columns real quick, and then let's go ahead and grab the CO2 emissions. So we will definitely be using dimensions and the measures in our rows and our columns. So we have a dimension, now we need a measure. So I'm going to put the CO2 emissions here. So you can see when I put the CO2 emissions over there, it automatically summed up the information, because as we were pulling the information in, we knew that it was broken down by state and sector and year. And since we have a single column for each state, it has summed up all the sectors into one column for each state. So that's Tableau trying to do what it thinks you want it to do. So one thing that Tableau also does is that it alphabetizes everything. And we don't always want to look at data alphabetized, right? This is not a very useful chart to see what is listed alphabetically, but we would maybe want to see this information ascending or descending. And we can do that in a couple of different ways. And I'm going to try to show you a couple of different ways to do multiple functions. So however you want to be doing that. I'm going to use this button here. It's called the descending, and it's a sort. I'm going to click on it, and it will automatically descend, sort it by descending order. And so then you can see Texas now is the most. So we have the most at the top and the least near the bottom. But we could do the same thing just by right clicking on the state and sorting. And you can see it is already set for descending. So it's not going to really change anything. And also you can use this little drop down menu and get to it. If you don't want to use the right click, you can use the drop down. So there's three things that you can do just in the same way, just however you want to use the functionality. Okay, so then let's also go ahead and use this. We have the ascending button right next to it. So if I wanted to do that, it would automatically turn it around. But I think descending will be the best here, because we will be looking at emissions clearly. We want the most emissions near the top. That's the data that we'll probably be looking at if we were really looking at this data. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on the swap rows and columns. And so now we've made this data a little bit more user-friendly. I can read the states' names, and we have that kind of set out to the side, so that the most are at the top of the screen, and we can see the decreasing numbers as we go down. So our next thing we might want to do is, let's say we wanted to sort this by sector. I would just drag the sector potentially to the columns, and it would have that all broken down by individual columns. So we have 5 charts here. We can also drag the sector to be colorized, and it will colorize the different columns. So each is represented by a different color. And you can see that it has put a legend out here to the side. But again, what has Tableau done is alphabetized it. So we want to make sure that we don't want it to just be alphabetized. So we're going to choose to sort by the sector. And we're going to make sure we sort by the field. And we want that to be descending. And then we can close it. And so that has changed this so that the least amount is in commercial and the most amount is in electrical power. Well, we have made this more visual and better. We have not dealt with how long the chart is yet. So looking at all 50 is a little overwhelming. So let's go ahead and remove some of the states. So some of the options that we can use over here is we have these different cards, and we've been using the marks card, but we can use the filters, and if we just, so we're going to drag the state to the filters, and it's going to pull up this little window. I'm going to unexpand this so you can kind of see this card a little bit easier first. So we have 4 different options here. We have the general that was open when we first looked at it. And we have the wildcard, condition, and top and bottom. So the general really allows you to set, you know, pick and choose what you want to select here, or you can also exclude these from here. And the wildcard is kind of more like a Boolean search, if you will, so that if you wanted it to exactly match or does not contain, then you could have that set up here. And then a conditional is a little bit more what I would think most people are kind of would be familiar with, that you could have you know, a conditional statement if, you know, there is by field or by a formula the CO2 emissions, and then make it a condition over here. And then the last one, which is automatically set up by Tableau already. And so I'm going to go by field, and it automatically knows that we're using the emissions. And I'm going to have the top rank listed here, but I think I'll use 15. But you could see the bottom if you wanted to see the last 15 of the states. So the ones with the least amount of emissions, if that's the data you're looking for, you can use that. And this, you have to kind of pull this up. They've made it a little bit long. And so you can, I think I'm zoomed in a little bit. So if you're on a normal screen, then you would see the whole box. But I just had to get down here so I could get to the OK. And so then you can see that, oh, that did not do what it was supposed to do. Let's try that again. Maybe I didn't save it. Edit filter. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't get it there. 15. Let me say okay. I just didn't read it. Sorry, guys. All right, so then it's updated this, and so we only have the top 15 most emissions from the states. All right, so that is a little bit of looking around in here. We can see that we've made this chart as a bar chart across 5 different sectors, and we've used a few of these different features. I'm going to go ahead and name this item, this sheet, and I can just right click on that sheet and say rename, and I'm going to put bar here so we know that this is the bar chart. I think this is pretty good practice to try to name everything as you go, so you don't have to click around very much, but I don't always do that, so you know, best practices though, right? And so then I'm just going to go ahead and get a new sheet, and we can try a few different other things. So what we're going to look at here is the sector area emissions. So we're going to drag the sector to the text. Now I'm just trying to show you some different things that you can do in Tableau. And so this probably would not be something you would need to do with this data per se. This is just giving you the labels for each of the sectors. And then now we can drag the CO2 emissions to size. And we've created a tree map. So a tree map really just uses these rectangles to represent the values in this large rectangle. And so the smaller the rectangle, clearly the less value, or the smaller the number of that rectangle. So some people really like to use this in business or finance, and a lot of times you'll see these on infographics if you're interested in that. And this is a fine visualization, but what if I really wanted to have circles instead of these rectangles? I can come over here to this card and look at this automatic, And I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to select circles instead. And it's going to pull it into a circle. And so we got rid of the rectangles for the circles. And we've got a chart now that's called a packed bubble chart. Now I'm going to kind of get this to change back to text so that we could see a word cloud. So if we would just grab the sectors and put it in detail. Oh, sorry. And label. Sorry, let's take another sector and we'll move that into color. And we'll see that, colorize them. And then if we take that sector and move it into label, it should be into a word. That is not okay. So we'll leave this as a bubble chart, and we'll do Thank you. Yes. Sorry, I was using the wrong drop down. So thank you, Jing. That helped me. So we just moved that from the circle to the text, and then we were able to see the word cloud word cloud. Sorry. And so the word cloud, there's lots of tools out there that can really build a word cloud, and I want to use the Tableau just to build a word cloud, but I wanted you to see some different examples of some charts that are maybe kind of unique to Tableau, like the packed bubble chart or this word cloud. And then let's go ahead and name this the word cloud. And see if we can get a new sheet going. I'm just going to grab a new sheet at the bottom. And then let's kind of talk about what we've been looking at so far. I'm going to click back on the bar sheet. And so we've been looking at this and seeing what we can do with all of this data. But what if we wanted to get, is this the best data that we can get for this? Some of the states that are our most populous ones are at the top. So what if we wanted to normalize for population? Would that change the chart at all? So if we were going to try to do a per capita calculations here, we would need to get some more data. So Tableau makes that really easy for you to pull in the data from a secondary source. So if we go back to our data source, we see that we still have our state CO2 1990 2018 here, but then we can go ahead and pull in the state populations. So the state pops spreadsheet, if you'll drag that over here, what we're creating here is a relationship. And let's talk about that a little bit. I don't know about y'all's history with Tableau, but just last year, they kind of updated this to incorporate, this is called a relationship. This little line here is a relationship. They used to just have joins data. And so you can see the joins down here if you wanted to learn more about that. But as we were building in here, we can kind of look at that. Before, they would kind of marry these two into one sheet. And this, it still keeps it in the two separate sheets, and it just has a relationship with it. Here you can see that we're having an issue, and Tableau wants us to help us marry the information together. So we're going to look down here and see what's happening. So we can see that our state CO2 1990, 2018 is listed here, and our state POPs is listed here. So we're going to select a field from this sheet, and we're going to use the state, and we're going to select a field over here, and we're going to marry that to the state as well. So we have the CO2 state equals to the population. And you can see now it's starting to pull a sheet together. We're going to add one more field, and I'm going to put in CO2 year equals again, and you can change these if you needed to, but we're going to leave it as equals. And we're going to use the population year. And so then let's go ahead and look at this data. I'm going to update now so you can see what it's doing. And I'm going to pull this up again just a little bit, and so we can talk about this a little bit more. So you can see if I click on the 1990 to 2018 sheet, it will pull up that information. If I put up the state one, it'll pull up that information. If I wanted to look at the relationship, it will pull up that information. And so I can manipulate any one of these depending on what I needed to do here. And then let's go ahead and make sure that the state population information came in, just like we looked at the first sheet coming in. We wanted to see if this data has been read appropriately. And so it has the names of each of the columns here. It's identified that the state is a global role, geographical role. It is identified that this is a number, and it's a whole number. Remember, this is a population, so you want to have a partial person. And then this is a year. So again, this should be a whole number as well as the year. So now let's go ahead and get back into our sheet 3. And it's going to bring in the extraction again. So anytime you see that it's creating an extraction, it may take it a second to move over, but then we always want to save that after we've done an extraction. So I'm going to go ahead and click publish right here. Again, you can do that from here or over here. And so it didn't take long for it to publish it at all this time, because it's just using that extraction as almost a pre-publication, and then when you push publish, it's there. So let's look over here on our information again. It's just kind of collapsed these two, because now we have two different tables in here. So I'm going to open this, and then I'm going to open this one. And we have our state, the CO2 1990, 2018, but now we also have the state population. Those are the titles to each of those informations. And then we have our dimensions and our measures from each of those items. But what else do we have sitting over here? We have the longitude and the latitude sitting here. And it was generated by Tableau. And you can tell that because it tells you it, but also because it's italicized. And so it can pull that information in because states have boundaries, and we can know the longitude and latitude to the boundaries of the states. Okay, so remember we were trying to do a calculation for per capita, but to get to that, we have to calculate how the population affects the emissions. So we need to do a calculated field, and you can do this several different ways, but I'm going to go to the CO2 emissions, and then I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to click on create or hover over create and get to a calculated field. And then you need to name this calculation. I'm just going to name it like normalized emissions. You can name it whatever you want to name it. And then I'm going to go ahead and build the formula here. And so you can see that it's already pulled in the CO2 emissions because that's what we were using it for. And then we're going to divide that by the population. And as I start to type, uh-oh. Oh no. Well, I'm sorry, what happened there? Let's see what it's doing. I don't know if my connection just dropped or what. Let's see if it will come back. And I'll get back on sheet 3. It's suddenly put me on the bar sheet again. I never had this happen. I was making sure I was saving it as I was going so that it would have that option if we needed it to. I'm not sure what has happened to my connection. Yeah, okay. I'm going to give it a second longer to see if it's going to resolve itself. I don't know if I could even just hit refresh and see if it would land us here. Let's give it a whirl. Okay, we're in sheet 3. Let's see what it was doing. Okay, I don't think it really took that calculated field, so I'm going to do the same steps I was doing just a second ago. I'm going to right click on this emissions. I'm going to do create. I'm going to do calculated field. I'm going to name it again, normalize emissions. I was talking about that it was doing the CO2 emissions. I'm going to do the division symbol. It's telling me there's an error there only because I haven't put something behind the division. I'm going to start to type in population estimate, and you can see it will bring up all of the populations here, and I'm going to click on this one. I'm sorry I didn't know what happened before, so we'll just keep moving forward though. And then I'm going to say okay. So what we have in the box was emissions divided by the number of people in the state. And so we clicked OK. And then let's go ahead and kind of look at this. I know it's kind of small. I'm going to maybe try to zoom in just a bit so you can see that. This normalized emissions is sitting here, and it has a little tiny equals in front of that. And I wanted you to be able to know that that means that it is a calculated field. So if you see that, that's what that means. I'm going to go ahead and pull that back out so we can see more of the screen. Oops, I went the wrong way. It has moved it down here because we built it from these other tables, and that's why it is sitting down there. So one way of doing this, we're going to be looking at state and normalized emissions. We're going to click on the CO2 state. And since we have our emissions already here, if I click on control on a Word or command on a Mac, if I click on that, then they both will be highlighted. And I wanted to show you that Tableau will kind of help you figure out what you need to do with that data by using this show me. If you click on that, it will highlight the ones that would be applicable. So if we're over here, we're just looking around, we can see that it's going to tell you down at the bottom what is useful. So a map would be useful here because it has a dimension or a measure, a bar chart, a tree map, but those that are grayed out would not be useful because they just don't think that that would be as well received. Let's go ahead and click on the bar chart. Sorry, I got confused there for a second. And I'm going to go ahead and close the show me. Here in public, it kind of, once you open it, it stays open, or you need to close it. And desktop, it kind of maneuvers around itself. So we've seen this kind of bar chart. I'm going to actually use this clear button here, and it will just clear the sheet. So we're going to try to look at this a different way to build it. I'm just going to click this and clear sheet. And then I'm just going to double click on the normalized dimensions, and it's going to build it in here. And you can see that it summed it up into one column. So here's an example of what we were discussing about in the PowerPoint, that Tableau will try to guess what you want. Since I only gave it one number, you see that it summed it into the one total. It totaled it all up and decided it should be a bar by default. I didn't have to tell it what to do. But let's go ahead and split it up over the CO2 state. So we're just going to drag that, or you can double click it, and it has put it back into this. So we can quickly do the descending again and rotate that. And now you can see Wyoming is at the top because we've controlled for population. Now, don't think that I did all of that just to get Texas out of the first spot, but Texas is still here in the top, 15, because we have our, our top ones here. And if we wanted to identify this with a color again, we can just drag the sector over onto the color, or even into the chart. It will do a stack chart, or we could drag it to the color and it would do the same kind of presentation. So let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to rename this stacked. And then let's go ahead and get into a new sheet. And let's see if we could do a line chart. So let's use the year for the horizontal axis. And that is usually how you want to do for a line chart. So I'm going to just grab the CO2 year, and we're going to put it up here into the columns. You can see it is across the x-axis. You can use either year, the CO2 year or the population year, because it would be the year across. But I just grabbed the CO2 year. And then let's give it a number. We're going to give it the normalized emissions again, and we're going to put that into the rows. And so you can see that we have a single line here, and it has all the points, and it's across the years. But it's a pretty simple chart. It did sum them all up. But if we wanted to maybe look at this data a little bit more, we might want to look at the sector here so that we could have some more information. So I'm just going to pull the sector to color. And then that's going to give us the 5 different sectors here. So also, while we're sitting here, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what it's done. It has presented the legend over here, and it has colorized, of course, the line, so we can see that. But let's say we didn't want the colors for whatever reason. We could always take the sector to the detail, and it would just have it labeled with a single color, with the blue here. But we now kind of need to, while I hover over it, you can see the different labels, but I could take this sector to label, and it would put a label out here to the side so you could see that. I really kind of like the colors, so I am going to put it back into the color, but you can leave it however you want to. So, and then I'm going to label this one a line chart. I'm just going to label it line. Say okay. Okay, and so then let's go ahead and get one last sheet and see if we can't build a map. So I'm going to click in here and let's drag the state to the center. And it's automatically going to choose the map for us because we just wanted to use a state. I'm going to kind of move this a little bit around. You have to use this little moving machine here and kind of get it more centered for us. You can see that it's brought North America to the front and center here because we have the data just for the United States. So it knew that we were looking at this part of the map. And that's one great thing that Tableau does is when it does guess for you and it does it great, then it helps you navigate your information. So it has put it in with just what is considered the symbols map. If I click on the show me again, you can see that's what we have here. But I really like the this other kind of filled in map. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to click show me again so it will move it out of the way and then move the thing kind of back to the center as well. So now that we have this changed to a filled in map, we're going to drag the emissions, normalize emissions to the color area because we just have all the states as the same color. And if we colorize it this way, then you can see the different emissions are represented by the scale. And so you can see Wyoming is very dark blue, whereas other states are starting to be shaded a little bit lighter, like maybe Colorado or California. And Texas is kind of somewhere in the middle along with Alaska. So when you have a single value, the scale is always this kind of blue shade, although you can change that around if you didn't like the blue. But remember when you drag the sector to the color and we have 5 sectors, it gave a different color to every sector. So Tableau knows if it's a dimension or a measure, and dimension multiple colors and measure you have the color scale. So we've created several sheets now and we want to combine them into a dashboard. How will we go about doing that? I'm just gonna get back down to the bottom of my workbook here and not use the first one to get to a new sheet. Oh, before we do that, let's make sure we name sheet 5. I'm gonna just name it map so we can see that that will be a map. And instead of using this first sheet, let's use this second sheet, second icon, and it's the dashboard. So I'm going to click on it. It's going to create a dashboard for us. So you can see the difference of this screen is we have all of our sheets that we've just built here on the left. And we could still get back to our data source if we wanted to, or any one of these sheets, but we can build them in here to build the dashboard part. So currently we have the size sitting here. So we have this desktop browser and you can change it to automatic and it will increase the space that I'm going to be able to use for my dashboard. So I'm going to show you that. So it opened it all the way across. But it's really good for you to kind of look in here and think about what you're building and what you want to be using this information for, because under the fixed size, you can kind of customize. So if you really wanted this to be, you know, on a web page or on a mobile device, you know, something a little bit smaller, you want to make sure that you're using whichever platform would be best for that display. So like if you know most people are going to be looking at it through an iPad, you might get down here. If you wanted to use the full screen, the desktop or laptop, more people are using laptops than ever before. And so I think that you could set this to make it look the best your data will look. I'm going to go ahead and use the fixed today so that we can use the whole screen and pull in some different things here. So I'm going to pull some different sheets in. Let's go ahead and start with the bar chart, and we'll pull that over. And when I drop it in here, it will take up the whole space. But as soon as I pull something else in, then it will accommodate for that. So I'm just going to grab the map, and I'm going to put it, you can put it wherever you want it. You can put it side by side or on this side, across the bottom or across the top. I'm going to just put it at the bottom. And then I think let's go ahead and pull in one other one. I'll pull in the line. I think I'll just set it over here. And so as these are sitting here, I can maneuver these. So maybe the line doesn't need as much as information as much space as the bar chart. So I can just grab this and kind of move it over a little bit. And then so you can manipulate that however you want. This legend really goes with this bar chart. So I'm just going to click on that. I'm going to see that little gray thing, and I'll be able to move it over. I'm just going to put it on this side of the item. And it doesn't need that much space, so I'm going to pull that back down. And then this actually goes with the map, so I'm going to move it down here. I'll put it on this side of the map, and we can let that see what we think about that. Maybe I don't even need this chart. This legend, I could totally stitch it, because we can see the electrical power, transportation, all of that is already identified with the color. So if we wanted to use this color label, we could still see that represented over here. So I could go ahead and close that, and that gives us a little bit more space. You could put all 5 visualizations that we have on our sheets over here, or you could just use these 3, or you could use 2, however you decide to represent your data. The other thing is, if I'm clicking on this, then you can see this little filter. If I use that filter, if I make it active by clicking on it, it will fill it up. And then this will make this chart the one that kind of controls the other maps. It'll be interactive. So if I select for Texas, you can see now the Texas data is sitting here, and only Texas is represented in the map down below, or I can choose Pennsylvania and the same thing happens, or California. The other thing is, if I just needed it to be back to all of the information, I can just click on the white space and it will represent all of the information again. The other thing is, let's say I wanted to just look at electrical power. So I could click on it and it will represent just that. So that you can set this up and then let this be for your readers, and your readers can manipulate it just like we're manipulating it as well here. And I can show you how that is happening. Let's go ahead and label this dashboard. I'm going to right click and rename this. I think I will name it emissions, but also keep the word dashboard here so we can see it when we're actually out of the editing kind of portion of it, and say okay. And so we have saved all of this. I'm just going to do that one more time just to make sure, but I don't think it will take us but a second. Oh, that's right. And so since we've already done the extraction, we don't have to save again. So you can always do extraction again under data source. I'm just going to click back to close here. And then that will be back on my main page of my account in public. I know it's a little bit confusing using the public, Tableau public. This is the work area in Tableau public, and then where your kind of home page to your account, your profile is. Maybe it's going to make us do this. Hold on, let's see here. It's saying, I wonder if because I had that glitch, maybe y'all are not having this. I'm just going to quickly do this extraction again. I don't want to lose anything, but I'm just going to click back on data source and then do the extract, and it will just take a second. Sorry about that. Maybe because maybe I lost a little bit of connection and didn't know what was happening. I hope this doesn't take too long. Sometimes it takes just a few seconds, and sometimes it kind of gets hung up. So we'll see how long it takes that. I might even stop it and see if we need to restart it. Okay, I'm going to try one more thing and see if I can get it to go a little bit faster. I don't know if it's just that glitch that happened. Let's see if it will go faster this time. Sometimes it just takes like, 15 seconds, not even. I'm not sure what's happening. And how is everybody else doing? Were they able to save it and not have that glitch that I had happen? Okay, thanks, Steph. Yeah. All righty. I don't want to sit here and just wait and see it. And if I don't save it, it's not a big issue. We can still move forward. I just wanted y'all to be able to see how it was published. And I have an example in case we, if I needed it. I didn't think I would need it, but it seems like maybe I did need it. Let's see here. I think I'm going to go ahead and cancel this and see if it will let me just not publish it and see if it was already published. So I'm just going to say don't publish in this case and see. There it is anyway. So it didn't quite catch everything. It only caught until that glitch happened. So we don't have our dashboard here. But once we have published here, you can kind of look around. Let's kind of look at that information. If I wanted to get back in and do some more edits, I would just click here, and that would put me back into the place that we just came from. The other thing is I can scroll down here and do a little bit more details. And so if I click on this, it allows me to change the title to the workbook and have a little bit more description if I wanted to. It will also allow me to like have an inspiration link if you saw something else in Tableau that you wanted to credit, or it also let me link to publish this on another site. And so you can see that we've had that published an example on our LibGuide. And since I didn't change anything here, there's nothing to save changes, but I might just do that so we can save the changes here. And it tells you it was saved successfully. And then the other thing I wanted to point out here is the settings. So on this profile, I would show this viz on the profile. If I close this off, then you wouldn't see the submissions workbook here anymore. If I wanted to not show the sheets, you would see the sheets would disappear. since we don't have a dashboard now, you wouldn't see the dashboard remaining. So I'm going to show you that just quickly, but it will kind of eliminate what is happening here. And so it picked one just to be the visualization, I guess. And then this also allows access. So if you don't want others to be able to download or make copy of this visualization, you can just turn this off. Now, typically, I always leave the sheets on, and especially if I'm in Tableau Public, because this is information that is fine to share with the world, or else I wouldn't be putting it in Tableau Public. I would be putting it in my Tableau desktop. And so you can leave that. And then I usually just leave it on my profile as well. And you can kind of see that again. When I kind of click on my profile settings, you can see the one that we just saved here is sitting here. And then I will also pull up one that I have from the fall so that you can see the dashboard completed that we had just built. And here it is. And so I could get back in here and edit this. In fact, I might even open this. And then I can rename the dashboard to our emissions that we had tried, and see if it won't do better because it hasn't had the glitch. And then I could quickly publish this. And it will only take a second usually. See, that was just a second. And then I could come back out here and we see now the dashboard is called emissions. And if I were to manipulate these, show the sheets, you would only see the dashboard. You don't see the rest of the sheet. But I could leave those on. I'm perfectly happy leaving those on, but some people like to have a little bit cleaner look. And this is what your readers would be reading. So you could have them manipulate right from here. So we have, they wanted to just use Pennsylvania or Florida as an example. Or if I just needed to click out somewhere and have all of them come back to the visualization to be represented, then I could do that as well. Okay, so does anybody have any questions so far? And if you tried to save and you're having problems, let me know. I don't know if it's just a glitch in what happened with my internet connection, or if you're also having a problem and maybe there's something happening at Tableau Public. I'm sorry to hear that. It was working fine this morning, so I don't know why that happened. Our next. Okay, great. Thanks for the feedback, Steph. That was really nice. Okay, so it looks like other people are able to save and everything was going well. It might have just been my glitch. So let's talk about some other things that we're going to look at here. As we've built in some things, I really kind of want to talk about data, but I'm just going to pull up my PowerPoint real quick and get us looking at that again. Let me clean up some screens over here. So as we start to look at our data, we kind of really just had a set data set for our visualization today. But I wanted you to see, as we were looking at that, when you download data from like a government website or like maybe Dataverse or a data set that the library has access to, you will not have prepared that data. And so you might really look at that data to clean it up before you put it into Tableau. So anything that has an empty cell, Tableau won't really know what to do with that. So you might want to remove the empty cells or non-data rows. So sometimes, as we were talking in the beginning, it might have a question mark or, the phrase NA, not applicable, or sometimes even they have a tilde. So all that needs to be cleaned up. And you need to make sure each row is complete. And then also Tableau doesn't like it when the data is already totaled, because it wants to do the totaling. It wants to do the aggregation. So if you have any of those kind of totals, I would try to delete those or subtotals and get those out of the way. And really, what is the best information for Tableau is a big block of data, which works best for Tableau. And then we're going to talk about Tableau Pivot. And so that will be a quick way to help you clean up the data. And let's kind of look at what that data looks like before we get into a spreadsheet to kind of clean it up. So this is typically what I think of a spreadsheet in Excel, is that you'll have multiple columns with the dates, and listing all the way out to 2018 here, and then each one of them with Alabama with the 5 sectors. So then it has its Alabama commercial for 1990 and then on around. But Tableau really likes it to be the year to be all in one column, the sectors to be in all one column, the state to be all in one column, and the emissions to be all in one column. Whereas here we're kind of sorted by state and sector across the years. And so it really wants it to be long and narrow as opposed to short and wide. And so if you kind of think of it that way, that's a good way to look at it. So I'm going to show you how I kind of took an Excel spreadsheet and cleaned it up real quick. We're not really going to be focusing on Excel today, so I'm going to do that really fast. And I didn't really prep a sheet for you to look at, but I wanted you to be able to see what I did so you could understand it. So I downloaded this data straight from a government website. And for whatever reason, government data a lot of times will have extra information down here, just like notes. So just make sure you clean that up to begin with. And then at the top, we're going to highlight A, and we're going to click Find, go to Special. We're going to look for the blanks. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going a little fast here because this is not what I want you to necessarily learn. I just want you to see what the data changes to, so that you can know what your data should be looking like. So I'm actually going to put in equals A2 here. Oh, no, A2. And then I'm going to push Control Enter, and that's going to make it put the state all the way down. So it doesn't put Alabama all the way down. It puts the state that it is related to. So Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, all the way down to California. And then the next thing I'm going to do is clean up these little spaces and get rid of these subtotals, because we can't pull that into Tableau and expect Tableau to really understand that. So I'm going to look at the whole sheet now, and I'm going to sort a custom sort by sector and say OK. And what we've really done now is we've taken out all that extra spaces that were blank, and we've taken out all the subtotals, and the subtotals are now at the bottom. And we can come down here and just delete all this information. Sorry. And then this data is ready to go into Tableau. And I do think learning how to use Tableau Pivot is useful to you. So let's go ahead and take this data back into Tableau Pivot. So back into my Tableau public space here, I'm just going to click on my profile so that I can get a new visualization. And we're going to pull that. Oops, sorry. I'm going to pull that emissions file back in here. I'm having to start a new visualization because I did put in y'all's spreadsheet the pivot. You have to do the pivot first. So we couldn't use it from the other workbook. We had to create a new workbook so that we could do the pivot here. So I'm going to drag the pivot over here. And maybe y'all want to follow along now. So maybe you want to create a visualization and pull in the emissions again. I don't want to go too fast. I kind of did that a little bit fast. I'll kind of wait until y'all are here and then pull in the state CO2 pivot. And I can walk you through that again if we lost anybody. And it's ready for me to go. I'm going to kind of just hang out here for a second longer, just in case you needed that information. Okay, I think some of us are ready. All right, and so I'm going to kind of pull this up so we can look at the data again. So it's pulled in the information from this table across here. I'm going to click Update Now. But what is one thing that it has not done? So when it doesn't know what the field name is, it just starts labeling field 1, field 2, field 3. But we want to look at this and say, oh, we know that this should be state or sector. So I'm just going to right click on this sheet up here, the little box that I pulled into the tables here. And I want to make sure the field names are in the first row. And so then it automatically changes that. Instead of making that the first row, it has made that the headers, if you will. And I'm going to click Update Now. And let's make sure this data has come in right for everything else. We saw that it didn't bring in the fields, right? Is it bringing in everything else? Well, it did get to the globe for the state. This is still a string. And these are decimals. Oh wait, that is, well, that's interesting. Oh yes, that's it. So okay, so let's let that be for a second while we do the pivot, and then it will change it up so we can see that. So I'm going to go ahead and click this little tab so that we can collapse. And then we're going to highlight 1990 all the way to 2018 so we can pivot that. So these are the years and these are the emissions. So these should be decimals because they're reading the emissions with the decimal points. And so let's go ahead and highlight 1990. And if I do the control here for 1990, and then pull it all the way over to 2018, it should highlight them all the years, columns. So that is a shift in Windows, and if you're on a Mac, I think it's the Command button. And so then once I have those all highlighted, I'm going to right click in a column and get the pivot. And when I click this, it will change those all around to the year, and the emission will be reversed. Now, some people think that this is a little confusing if they know how things are pivoted in, and I'll kind of put our screen back to the way we've been seeing it. I pushed our update now, and I opened up our field area. But as I was saying, some people are a little bit confused by that because if they know how Excel pivot works, because it seems to be backwards to people. But I'm not very expert in pivoting in Excel, so this seems to be pretty straightforward. Just in a matter of a few minutes, I was able to technically download that spreadsheet that you saw me clean up and clean it up and then get it in here and have it all sitting here. So, but let's make sure our data is right here. So again, we have the Alabama, which is a state, and it is a geographical role. This should still be a string. It is. And then this just says it's a pivot field name, and this is a pivot field name. So we need to name them. I'm just going to right click on that, and it'll allow me to rename that. And I'm just going to put in year. And every time you do this, if you don't have the automatic on, it will ask you to update it. I'm not going to update it until I've got all my things completed first. But I want to make sure that this is not a string now, it is a number. So we want to make sure it's a whole number because it is a year. I'll go ahead and do that for our next one. And then I'm going to right click this, rename, and this will be our emissions. And then we would want to make sure that our emissions is a decimal point and it read it as such. So now we would be ready to go with our state populations like we had before. We could pull that over and marry the information. So I had already pulled that in for you appropriately in the 1990 to the 2018. But I thought that was useful information for you to see how to get data into Tableau and maybe how to use the pivot if you are not familiar with other tools to get you to help clean up your data. And so just by doing simple steps in Excel and then some steps here in Tableau, you could get this information ready for to work in Tableau as well. Okay, so how's everybody doing? I thought we might go ahead and look at some quick information in our last Excel spreadsheet, the Netflix information, and see if we can't learn how to do some of our own maneuvering. And I'm not going to say this, but if you want to say this so that you could maybe look at it again, feel free to do so. But so I need a new visualization to pull in that new other data so that it's not confused with this CO2 data. So I'm going to go ahead and click out of here. And I'm not going to publish this. And then I'm going to get another viz, create a viz. And then I'm going to pull, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me show you something else because I want to be able to show you where to get that information. So I pulled some data specifically from Tableau so that you could see that information. And from the resources area, and then under sample data, this is the set of data that we're going to be looking at. And you can download it just like I did here. Now, I didn't clean up this data, so we're going to see a little bit of that. So I've downloaded it here, and then I'm just going to click back on my profile. And while we're sitting here, you can see that I've used like almost half of what, 4 megabytes of my 10 gigabytes, which still will allow you to do quite a bit more. And now I'm going to go ahead and click create the viz. And it's going to ask me to drop in my data. I'm just going to pull it from here and drop it in. You can use it from wherever you've downloaded it from, or you could follow it through with the resources and drop it in that way. And changing even drop the link to the guide where the Netflix data is located. I'm going to give you all a second to kind of get set up too. So this is new data that I really haven't played much around with, but when you pull in a Excel file, then it puts each sheet separated here. And most of the time in data sets, the first sheet is going to give you the most information about that data. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that tab over into our tables, and then let's kind of look at that information. I'm going to pull this up a bit so we can see what we're looking at again. Not all the way because we have lots of rows, columns here. And so I'm going to go ahead and click update now. And so we do see some information that if we were really going to use this for some serious research, I would want to clean up that data. But I think it will do what we need to do here. And let's just make sure our data came in the way we wanted to. It did read the first line as the headers, so we don't have to fix that this time. And we're seeing lots of strings here, or text files, string variables. And then this one is a new one we hadn't seen. It's like a little calendar, and that means that it's a date added. And so it is a date because it has the day, the year, the day, the month, and the year. So it is really going to treat all of those as opposed to just as the year. This is a year when the item was released. And we can keep going down and looking at some other things here, and the ratings and descriptions, and then the show ID. So let's go ahead and look at one other one of these and see what is on it. I'm going to pull it over and drop it in the top where we've been dropping other things. And so you can see we only have 2 columns in this data. I'm going to update now. And so it has the cast and the show ID. So we can see that this show ID is going to be the connection between all of these. And we can use that if we needed to marry those. But you see, we don't even have an issue with this like we did in our CO2 and state populations one. It already married the show ID from the Netflix titles file to the Netflix titles cast. So it knows that those 2 are equal. And let's go ahead and pull this down just a little bit more so we can pull some of these others in. I'm going to pull the categories over. Now notice I'm not dropping it right on top of anybody. I want to drop it just to below that. And so then these are all still relationships because they're keeping each spreadsheet individual. We're not really joining it. If we were joining it, it would have the other new columns sitting out here. You would be able to see that. I'm going to update now and make sure that my information has come in well. Everything seems to be good. The relationship is good. It's identified the show ID to the show ID, but it's identified this as listed in. Well, that's not very useful to me. Like they had called this whole sheet category. So maybe we should change this to categories. I'm just going to right click and rename that. Or we could even use genre. So that is a word that we kind of use related to TV and movies genre. So we might use that, or category, whichever one you want to use. And I'm just going to click out to the left so that it will change it. So I've now renamed this field genre, and I can see that if I wanted to by clicking on here. Instead of seeing the relationship, we could see the fields and the field names, and then here's the ID. Again, if I just needed to look at the relationship one more time, I would just click on the piece that I needed to look at. So now that I've kind of cleaned that up, I'm going to go ahead and pull in the countries and the directors, just making sure that my data is coming in appropriately and dropping it down here. And I'm just going to look at this data, make sure we are what we say we are. And updating that as well. So I think everything is coming in good. I just like to make sure that is good, because if you get into a sheet now and you haven't made sure that the data coming in is correct or identified in the right way, that it's a string or a geographic role, then it will be hard for you to manipulate that once we get into the sheets. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into sheet 1. And it's creating the extraction, and then I'm going to quickly save that after so that it will work. Now this extraction usually takes just a couple of seconds. Usually I see it no longer than 30 seconds. Now if we end up waiting for a minute here, see, that wasn't even 30 seconds. That's what I'm used to, so I'm not sure what was happening a minute ago. And sometimes it just gets stuck on that wheel. So if you just move your mouse, it will move on. I'm going to go ahead and click publish as and rename this one. I'm just going to name it Netflix so that I know what it is. And I'm going to say, oh, yeah, that's fine. You can show the sheets as tabs. And then I'm going to click publish. And it may take it just a second, but don't make that panic. And then here we are. Now, we've got a lot of data sitting over here. So let's kind of look through this quickly. It has already expanded all of these tabs. So sometimes it lands in this way. And I like to always have it working with all of them expanded, just so I can see what is happening. And you can see each table has its title. So that this table is Netflix titles. This one's Netflix titles cast, category, and such on. And each has its dimensions and its measures. So you can see those dimensions and then the measures for each. And then because we have countries in here, Tableau was able to generate longitude and latitude. So what is something that we could build with this information? Do we think that we could do a simple bar chart? Maybe looking at the genre might be a good one to start with. So let's go ahead and put genre in the columns. And so it's made an individual column for each genre. And then let's go ahead and put the count in the rows. And so we have a simple bar chart here. I'm going to quickly do the, well, let's try the ascending. We haven't done anything ascending yet, but I think I'll go ahead and swap that information. So we still alphabetized really, except for the null and C. That's not as exciting as if we do the descending so we can see the most first, but it is interesting that we have the thrillers and the horror down here. I don't know about y'all, but that's mostly what I watch in Netflix. And so international movies is the most, and then drama and comedies, it seems like, with thrillers kind of in the middle. I'm sure that's thrillers for movies as opposed to the thrillers of the TV that we were seeing below. So that was a quick bar chart. Let's see if we can look at some other data since we have so much data here. I'm going to rename this bar real quick. And I'm going to get a new sheet. And let's see if we can do a line chart. Since we have a date added, let's see if we can compare the dates added to the Netflix titles. Does anybody have an idea about how that might happen? Okay, well, let's go ahead and pull in the Netflix titles. Let's do the date added. I'm going to put that in the column at the top, and then let's do the titles. And so we do have the null sitting here. So again, we might want to clean that up. But as Netflix kind of took off, you can see it's building in the early 2015, 2016. And then it clearly has peaked here only because this information was set out, I think, in 2019 or early 2020. And so they probably only have January or February sitting in here. And in fact, let's see if we can sort that way. So we have a whole year. I wonder, since we have the date added, I wonder if we could use a different mode. I'm going to right click on this and see if we can see something else. So you can see we see year or quarter or month or day here, but we also down below just see year, quarter, month. Oh, look, this has the month and the year. Let's see what happens when we sort that way. well, you can see that it's a lot more interesting, right? And you can see that it is populated and right. Okay, so that is starting in January of 2020 is why there's only so little bit of information in 2020. So you can see that this line chart allows us to see the month and the date there. I'm going to go ahead and name this line real quick. And let's see if we can do a map because we have that map information. I'm going to get a new, we have the countries. I'm going to get a new sheet. And I'm just going to double click on country and it will put it into the map itself. And, you know, it has done the symbols map. I really like the filled in map, so I'm going to change that quickly just by opening the show me and selecting the other one. And then I'm going to click show me again so it will kind of disappear. And let's go ahead and use our count of our titles to be colorized because they're all kind of the same at the moment. So if we put it in colorize, then we will see the scale of color again. And I'm going to move this back out to kind of recenter this a bit so we can see that a little bit more. And just kind of center it like this so we have the whole world in one view. And so while, of course, the United States has a lot embedded here, you can immediately see that India is a good population too. And I think that indicates that the UK is too. If I zoomed in a little bit, I think it's just a shade lighter than India, but not quite as light as some of these others. So that also lets you know who is really sending you know, shows to Netflix, you know, international shows or TV shows or movies, independent movies, that kind of thing that's showing up. And so that is just a quick way to look at some other data. And we can go ahead and get back out to just our workbook, if you will. I'm going to just quickly click I want to say, I'm sorry, I want to say publish, and it should just quickly work like before. That other one just had a glitch, and I'm sorry that happened in the middle of our workshop. So I'm going to click close. Oh, you know what? We didn't even build a data dashboard here. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to rename this one map before I go, and let's quickly drop this into a dashboard and so we can see what that looks like. Again, it's the second icon to get to the dashboard. And then I really like the map, so I'm going to put it in the center here. Let's do the line here. Now, because of this data, oh, and I'm going to change this to automatic so we can see it a little bit better. Yeah, sure. Thank you. I see that people are starting to maybe having to exit. We do have a evaluation. I would really love some feedback. This is only the second time that I've done this training, and I would love any kind of information that you want to leave me. Jingjing's dropping the evaluation in the chat. So if you have the time to do that, I appreciate that. Yes, we'll be sending out the recording as soon as we can. It takes a minute to get the closed caption done, but hopefully by the end of the week or early next week, we will have that done. And then I'm just going to quickly wrap up here. I'm going to rename this dashboard. Let's see, we'll just do Netflix dashboard so we can see what it is looking like at the end. And then if anybody has any questions too, we can definitely do that, especially if anybody had any problems saving or if they wanted to talk about the desktop Tableau, sorry. I'm going to go ahead and publish this so that we can see that when we get over to the other slide. Okay. And so going to take it a second to build it, I guess. That's interesting. It just saved and it was fine. Wow. I'm going to go back to my profile and see if it's sitting there. Yep, it's sitting there. It's just going to take a second, I think, for it to load. There it is. So again, you can change the settings in the gear and not show the sheets and just have the dashboard going. Or if you wanted that. Now, one thing I like to point out about this second dashboard that we created is that it is not really interactive, because this data with the line information of when things were released to where they're released from is not relatable, right? And so I can't manipulate on something here and change this chart, not like the other dashboard that we were looking at. So just be aware of that as you're building your own information. You want to make sure if you want it to be interactive, it has to be related in some way to the different pieces that you pull into the dashboard. Then your audience can see it from this location, or would be able to look at any of the sheets as well if I have those displayed. So. Okay, we're just like 10 minutes out from the end of our workshop, so I wanted to make sure if we had any questions. If we don't have any questions, thank you so much. I really appreciate you doing the evaluation. That was so nice. And then again, the evaluation. And everybody, I probably will send both videos. We did one in the fall and it did not have that glitch in the middle. And we covered basically the same thing. So if you wanted to watch either one or maybe kind of scrub through whichever one you thought might be useful. I'm just sad that that happened right in the middle, and in the fall one, it didn't happen at all. So you could at least see that as well. Okay. That's all I had to discuss today, unless anybody had any questions.